Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the person staring back at you in the mirror feels like a stranger. Not because your face has changed overnight, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped living as the person you truly are. You've been carrying an old version of yourself, one shaped by expectations, fear, compromises, and patterns you didn't even choose. Maybe it worked once, maybe it kept you safe, maybe it even brought you some success. But now it feels like you're wearing clothes that no longer fit, walking in shoes that aren't yours, rehearsing a script that doesn't belong to you. And here's the truth: nothing feels heavier than pretending. We are taught to cling to labels, our job title, our achievements, our roles, even our failures, as if they are our identity. But what happens when those labels suffocate us? What happens when the old story no longer reflects who we are becoming? That's the terrifying and liberating moment when you realize you are being invited to rebuild. Not because you are broken, but because you have outgrown your old self. This video is not about chasing perfection or building some glamorous version of yourself to impress the world. It's about uncovering the truth that has always been there, the self that is free, authentic, resilient, the self that is buried under noise, comparison, and distraction. And the journey to that self doesn't start with applause, likes, or validation. It starts in silence. It starts with the decision you make every single day to show up for yourself. And let's be honest, living this way is hard. The world doesn't make it easy. Everything around you is engineered to distract, to keep you chasing approval, to convince you that your worth depends on how much you produce or how much attention you can grab. But what if the real path forward isn't about doing more? What if it's about letting go? Letting go of outdated beliefs. Letting go of self-doubt. Letting go of the old masks that kept you trapped. What if the way to freedom is not in becoming someone new but in becoming real? That is the essence of this journey, rebuilding yourself every single day. Freedom is not a one-time gift. Authenticity is not a single announcement. They are practices. Practices that ask for courage in small moments, telling the truth instead of pleasing, focusing instead of scrolling, choosing growth instead of comfort. And here's why this matters to you. Somewhere deep down, you already know there's more. You've felt it, in the quiet moments before bed, in the dissatisfaction that lingers even when life looks fine on paper, in the restless energy that whispers, "This isn't it." That whisper is your authentic self knocking on the door. This video is your invitation to open it. We're going to explore what it means to live as your new self, not as a fantasy but as a daily practice. You'll see why freedom is not indulgence but discipline, why authenticity is not weakness but strength, and why rebuilding is not a one-time event but a lifetime craft. And along the way, we'll uncover practical lessons: how to reclaim your focus from distractions, how to free yourself from limiting beliefs, how to cultivate resilience, and how to celebrate the quiet victories that no one else sees but that matter more than applause ever could. So, if you've ever felt trapped by your own story, if you've ever wondered why you feel restless even when you've achieved what you thought you wanted, if you've ever dreamed of living a life that feels like it's yours, this video is for you. Stick with me until the end, because the insights here might be the key to unlocking a life that feels real, grounded, and deeply alive. Before we dive in, let me ask you one thing. If this resonates with you, if you are ready to rebuild, to live with freedom and authenticity, to claim your new self, please support this channel. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who might need it, subscribe so you don't miss future content. And if you'd like to go further in supporting this work, consider leaving a super thanks donation. Every gesture helps this channel grow and allows us to keep creating deep, meaningful content that goes beyond quick fixes and surface level advice. Now, take a breath, let go of distractions for a moment. This is not just another video. This could be the beginning of your rebuilding. Let's begin. You know the feeling when you catch yourself performing a role you perfected years ago, competent, familiar, even praised, but it suddenly fits like an old suit, tight in strange places. Sleeves too short, colors not quite you anymore. You keep wearing it because it has history and because people expect it. Yet a quieter self begins to insist that the costume is not the person. That is the first reliable sign of awakening. Not melodrama, not some cinematic epiphany, just the sober recognition that you have outgrown a previous version of yourself. The Romans had a word for this kind of inner noticing animadvertory to turn one's mind toward something with intention. The Stoic move is to turn it toward the truth. You are not broken, you are different. Growth has happened whether you scheduled it or not. Living as yesterday's self is not a moral failure, it is an understandable strategy. Identities are tools for making sense of chaos. We build them from early wins. Survival strategies. The praise we received for being a certain kind of student, worker, partner, or friend. They do their job until the context changes. New responsibilities, new constraints, new information about who we are under pressure, and then the same identity that protected us becomes the cage that confines us. Stoicism names this drift with precision. We suffer when we attach our peace to externals, reputation, roles, routines, instead of anchoring it in what is truly ours, our judgments, choices, and responses. When your days are organized to defend an old story about who you are, every deviation feels threatening, and the energy you could invest in becoming is spent in maintenance of a museum exhibit. Rebuilding is therefore not repair after damage, it is renovation after expansion. A house that doubles its family needs new rooms, not because the old walls are defective but because they were designed for a smaller life. The language of fixing yourself is misleading. It ties you to shame. The Stoic alternative is the language of practice. You are updating your blueprint to match reality. That is why the first work of rebuilding is perception, a clear view of where you are misaligned. Seneca recommends daily review not to punish the self but to free it. What did I do? What did I avoid? What did I do badly? And what can I improve tomorrow? This rhythm moves you from performance for the crowd to fidelity to an inner standard. Heraclitus, though not a Stoic, captured the law that underwrites all of this. No person steps into the same river twice. Because both the river and the person have changed. The modern twist is that we act like the river is fixed because the calendar repeats and the apps auto-fill our preferences. Our routines create the illusion of constancy while our reality's skills, relationships, health, responsibilities flow underneath. The mature response is not to dam the river but to become a better swimmer. That means welcoming the fact of change and consenting to be updated by it. If you are resisting a necessary rebuild, ask, what am I protecting? Comfort, image, or an outcome I cannot control? Identity often fossilizes around competencies. You were the fast deployer at work, the glue in your social circle, the reliable fixer in your family. These roles came with dopamine rewards, gratitude, status, safety. But the same circuits that reward you for being needed can punish you for being honest about your limits. A senior engineer becomes the bottleneck because her reputation says she can pull miracles at 2 a.m. A parent keeps peace by absorbing every conflict until resentment leaks into silence. A founder remains the vision long after a steady operator is what the company actually needs. In each case, the river moved, but the identity stayed. Awakening begins where you admit the mismatch without self-indictment. From there, rebuilding is a series of small, non-dramatic corrections executed consistently. Practically, rebuilding identity works best when you invert the usual goal-setting script. Instead of asking, what mountain should I conquer? Ask, what kind of person am I rehearsing today? The behavioral science phrase for this is identity-based habits. Lasting change sticks when the daily choices reinforce who you believe you are becoming, not just what you hope to achieve. In other words, you don't get disciplined and then act. You act with discipline and gradually become the person for whom this behavior is natural. This echoes a common theme in habit research, shifting from outcome focus to identity focus, summarized succinctly in Glasp's reading challenge notes. Lasting habits come from changing your self-identity, not just your behaviors. If that sounds abstract, translate it into one deliberate, visible act that you can repeat daily. The person who insists he is not a reader becomes a reader by reading one page after coffee every morning for 30 days. The professional who claims she is not a public speaker becomes one by recording a 2-minute voice memo summarizing the day's lesson for her team. The tired manager who complains about context switching becomes a systems thinker by designing one 5-minute checklist that protects the first hour of deep work. These are not hacks, they're votes for the future self. Each clean repetition thickens the identity and weakens the attachment to the old version. Stoicism adds the necessary steel. It refuses to outsource progress to mood. Motivation is welcome, it is not required. Many of us get caught in a cycle of, "I'll change when I feel ready," which is another way of saying, "I will wait for the river to stop flowing." The Stoic answer is composure plus practice. Do the next right thing because it is the next right thing. Here, simple structures help. Schedule the practice, protect it, and reflect on it at day's end. Even tiny rituals matter. Begin with 3 to 5 minutes of what matters most. Treat that block as sacred. And finish by naming one improvement for tomorrow. GLASP highlights on procrastination align with this approach. Break tasks into small, actionable steps. Build a routine, and emphasize present moment focus. None of this requires drama, it demands continuity. Now to the inner psychology of living as an outdated self. We cling to old identities because they once solved real problems. The achiever identity might have gotten you out of poverty. The peacemaker identity might have kept a volatile household stable. The witty cynic might have been the armor that let you survive high school. It is compassionate indeed, accurate to honor that history. But watch the trap. A strategy that saved you at 16 can sabotage you at 36. Stoicism teaches a disciplined gratitude. Thank the tool. Then put it down when it no longer fits reality. If you keep wielding a hammer, every situation looks like a nail, including the parts of your life that need stitching, not pounding. Consider 3 common, relatable scenes. First, the mid-career professional who built a reputation on always being available. It began as hustle and became a liability. Their calendar is a museum of legacy obligations. The rebuild is not a productivity sprint, it is a values correction. They choose 1 day per week to protect 2 hours of uninterrupted work. Coach their team to own decisions without escalation. And rehearse the script. I trust your judgment. Make the call and tell me what you learned. Within weeks, the identity shifts from resentfully indispensable to calm builder of capacity. Second, the parent who secretly believes. Good parents never say no to school requests. The old identity wins applause but ensures chronic depletion. The rebuild starts with a stoic boundary, saying no to what is not aligned, and a reframing. Declining a volunteer slot this month is not a failure of care. It is the maintenance of energy for deeper presence at dinner, bedtime, and the weekend game. They learn to measure parenting more by quality of attention than by public visibility. Third, the young creator who built an audience on hot takes and discovers she is bored of her own persona. The rebuild is a risk, quieter, slower, more thoughtful pieces that may lose engagement in the short term but recover integrity and longevity. She accepts a temporary dip because she is trading a performance for a practice. She learns the Heraclitean lesson: if the river is going to change anyway, let it change in the direction of honesty. Rebuilding meets resistance. Sunk cost fallacy. I've invested too much in being this person. Social pressure. Everyone knows me as X. And fear of the unknown. Who will I be without this role? The counter is clarity and repetition. Ask, specifically, what the old identity costs you now: sleep debt, background anxiety, creative stagnation, the inability to say yes to what matters because your calendar is full of what once mattered. Put numbers to it. Hours wasted, money foregone, relationships neglected. The math is often clarifying. Then make your experiments embarrassingly small so they are impossible to avoid. If you are rebuilding as a person who keeps promises to himself, start with one promise you can keep even on your worst day. A glass of water and 2 minutes of stretching after you brush your teeth. There is dignity in starting small. In fact, there is strategy in it. The smaller the act, the more consistently you can vote for the upgraded identity. Discipline without self-respect becomes punishment. Discipline with self-respect becomes dignity. That is why you celebrate small, even private wins, because celebration encodes identity. When no one is watching and you still choose the better path, you kindle trust in yourself, which is the resource that lets you take on bigger commitments without white-knuckling. It is also how you stop chasing applause for doing the right thing. You become the audience that matters. Over time, integrity replaces adrenaline. This is the Stoic inner citadel, a self that remains steady regardless of likes, reviews, or misunderstandings. Focus deserves its own note. We live in a fox's world: many things, many channels, many micro-identities. each attention fragment rewarded by a tiny hit of novelty. But durable rebuilds often require the hedgehog's discipline, one deep thing done well. Repeated, there is value in breadth, there is freedom in depth. A short essay on Glasp captures this contrast by noting that many famous hedgehogs achieved through a clear, narrow aim, an image you can borrow when you feel pulled apart by competing selves. You do not have to choose forever today. You only have to choose what this season is for and commit to it. Another psychological lever is your relationship with discomfort. The old identity is optimized for ease, the new one requires friction. Especially at the edges where habits and beliefs are being recoded. Train yourself to do one deliberately inconvenient thing each day. Take the stairs. Ask the awkward but necessary question. Write the first ugly paragraph. Decline the reflexive yes precisely because it contradicts your autopilot. Glasp highlights from performance and mindset notes frame this as expanding your capacity by embracing the inconvenient, not avoiding it. The point is not masochism, it is sovereignty. Each time you choose the hard but honest move, you notify your nervous system that you are safe in discomfort, and that message is the oxygen of growth. If you want a simple, Stoic-aligned weekly cadence for rebuilding, try this. At the start of the week, name one identity shift you are rehearsing. I am a calm responder. I am a present learner. I am a builder, not a firefighter. Translated into 3 micro behaviors: 30 minutes of phone-free reading after lunch, a 1-sentence pause before replying to tense emails, a nightly 2-line debrief on what you did well and one improvement. At the end of each day, perform a brief review. Research-flavored advice preserved on Glasp recommends precisely this kind of structure: time-blocking learning, pre-deciding your agenda, and reinforcing the identity of learner by keeping the appointment with yourself. It's elegant because it harmonizes Stoic reflection with modern habit design. All of this brings us back to the river. Rebuilding is consenting to flow without losing the oar. You do not need to predict the rapids to become a stronger rower. You need to practice rowing when the water is calm so that your body knows what to do when it is not. This is the paradox of the awakening phase. The outside still looks the same. You go to the same job, parent the same kids, write in the same notebook, while the quality of your attention shifts dramatically. You stop asking, "Do they approve?" and start asking, "Is this aligned?" You stop measuring days by how many fires you put out and start measuring by how faithfully you invested in the self you're becoming. You move from, "What will this get me?" to, "Who will this make me?" That single pivot is the axis of the whole rebuild. To anyone worried that rebuilding means abandoning their past, think of a musician evolving across albums. The early records are not mistakes, they are chapters. You can honor the hits that built your audience while writing new work that sounds like your present. In life as in art, the test is not, "Is this familiar?" but, "Is this true?" The answer requires quiet. That is why the awakening is usually invisible from the outside. You stop asking for applause for the internal choices that only you can verify. You notice the river, and instead of cursing its motion, you learn its rhythms. You let go of the old shore, not because it was bad, but because the other side is calling. You rebuild not as an act of self-rejection, but as an act of self-respect. Glasp sources that echo and clarify these practices: identity-based habits, building routines around who you're becoming, present moment focus, system over goal thinking, and deliberate discomfort align tightly with this awakening. We change sustainably by changing what we do because of who we believe we are, and by practicing that belief in daily, visible, modest ways. Silence is underrated because it won't applaud you back. When you start working on yourself without broadcasting it, there's no dopamine hit from notifications, no subtle bribe of public praise, no quick feedback loop that tells you you're doing it right. The modern environment is designed to reward noise, hot takes, visible hustle, performative struggle, but inner work matures in the opposite climate. It prefers the slow oxygen of quiet. The first discipline, then, is learning to keep promises to yourself when there is no audience, no scoreboard, and no guaranteed payoff. Just the simple contract: I will show up because that is who I'm becoming. The moment you stop negotiating with that contract, "I'll do it when I feel like it. I'll do it when someone notices," you graduate from chasing validation to building character. Character is inconvenient because it grows in private, and private work doesn't trend. But private work is the only kind that can't be taken from you. When a job title shifts, when an algorithm buries your post, when praise dries up, the skills and standards you constructed in silence remain. They are portable wealth. The silence is not empty. It's a gym. In that gym you train attention. Because attention is the currency behind every other change you want. If your attention is traded away scattered across feeds, hijacked by other people's emergencies, your day becomes a reaction to whatever shouts the loudest. Inner work starts by reclaiming a slice of morning or evening where you ask, without theatrics, what actually matters today? Then you protect that slice with the stubbornness you usually reserve for other people's needs. This is not selfishness, it's stewardship. You cannot offer what you haven't cultivated. You cannot lead a team if your mind is a tab explosion. You cannot love well if your body lives on fumes. You cannot create if every quiet idea is interrupted before it blooms. The silence becomes a greenhouse. Inside it, you grow the habits that later scale. Small habits are deceptively powerful because they are not merely behaviors, they are identity rehearsals. Do one 2-minute act every day that only the future version of you would do. And you are not just checking a box. You are casting a vote for who you are. The reason so many life overhauls collapse is that they focus on spectacle, the 90-day transformation, the viral commitment, the new me announcement. Real change, the kind that persists, looks mundane from the outside. It starts with shrinking the commitment until it is impossible to skip and then repeating it until it feels like the truth about you. You become a reader by reading one page after coffee. You become an athlete by touching the floor to stretch for 60 seconds before your shower. You become a calm responder by pausing one breath before you reply to anything tense. You're not waiting for motivation. You're building an identity scaffold that makes motivation less relevant. Glasp's recurring reading challenges summarize this well. Lasting habits come from choosing who you want to be and reinforcing that identity with small, consistent actions, rather than chasing outcomes alone. That identity-first approach fixes a frustrating paradox. You can execute a big plan for a few weeks with adrenaline. But you can't live there. When the novelty decays, you need a quieter fuel source. Systems beat moods because they lower the activation energy. The ritual matters more than the volume. 5 imperfect minutes done today build more momentum than a theoretical hour you keep postponing. There's a reason pilot checklists look insultingly simple, because simplicity is durable under stress. Copy that logic for your inner work. Write a checklist a child could follow. Drink water. Stretch. Read a paragraph that elevates your standard. Plan the single important task. End the day with a 2-line review. James Clear calls it the compound effect of tiny habits. Glasp's curation puts it plainly: small changes compound. And systems matter more than goals. There's a second reason to love small habits. They trigger a domino effect. A 2-minute evening reset can lead to a cleaner desk, which reduces morning friction, which raises the odds you start deep work on time, which changes the tone of your afternoon, which makes you less likely to seek numbing behaviors at night. It's not magic, it's leverage. Build one keystone habit that quietly nudges 3 others in the right direction, and your environment begins to cooperate. Glasp highlights call this the chain reaction of good habits. A small, motivating habit becomes the seed that aligns your behaviors with your self-image. Translation: if the ritual matches the person you claim to be, your brain will help you stay consistent because inconsistency feels like a lie. Silence also protects you from one of the most corrosive addictions of our era: applause. The need to be seen doing the right thing can quietly replace the need to do the right thing. You start writing for screenshots, reading for Goodreads, lifting for the watch screenshot, meditating for streaks. The tool isn't the problem, the intention is. Performative habits teach your nervous system to outsource pride. Private habits teach it to generate pride internally. When you celebrate what no one else sees, you insulate your progress from the weather of other people's opinions. This is not asceticism, it's anti-fragility. Public praise should be a nice side effect, not your oxygen. Seneca would call this returning to enough. The man who always needs a witness is poor even when he is rich, because his contentment belongs to the crowd. The Stoic standard is different. You own your judgments and your choices. You measure success by whether your actions align with reason, not by whether they trend. Inner work through this lens is a training in sufficiency. It teaches you to want what's valuable and to be indifferent to what's merely visible. That includes the trap of optimizing your life for optics, what looks impressive on paper but hollows you out from the inside. The antidote is a sequence of small practices that recenter your attention on what you can control: your effort, your standards, your response. Tools like daily reviews and journaling are not aesthetic, they are ways of codifying your values into behavior. Glasp's Stoic curation circles this point repeatedly. Journaling and daily reflection are core exercises for aligning conduct with principle and building the inner citadel that's steady under stress. To see how this plays out in everyday life, picture a software lead who is quietly burning out. He's the unofficial firefighter, the default person for late fixes, the hero in incident channels. He complains about chaos but rewards it by always being available. No applause, no change. So he sets a private rule: the first 90 minutes each morning are for proactive engineering tests. Documentation, design reviews, no pings, no calls. He pairs it with a 2-line evening audit. What did I do that prevented a fire tomorrow? And what will I do first thing to reduce chaos by 1%? No one claps for this. No one even knows. After 3 weeks, the tone of his sprints shifts. Fewer last-minute scrambles, better handoffs, better sleep. He didn't become a different species, he rehearsed a different identity: builder, not firefighter. The habit was small, the identity was large. Or take a nurse who keeps saying she'll get healthier when the schedule stabilizes, which is another way of outsourcing her body to an HR calendar. She is not free to redesign shift work, but she is free to standardize recovery: 20 minutes of daylight after nights. A simple hot-cold rinse routine. 2 liters of water staged at the door. 3 10-minute walks per shift. A hard boundary on off-day favors. No hashtags. No grind set. Within a month, she reports less irritability with patients' families and more patience with herself. The domino started with water and sun. A third example. A young parent who treats bedtime like a countdown to doom because his mind is still in his inbox. He stops negotiating with himself about scrolling during the last hour. He plugs the phone in a different room and reads a paperback on the floor while his child flips pages. He is not optimizing family time for productivity. He is practicing the identity of presence. In silence, with no audience, the child will not remember the book list, only the lap. The parent will remember that he can choose sufficiency over stimulation. The constant across these examples is a refusal to let mood decide. Mood is a weather system, discipline is an infrastructure. You don't fix a leaky roof by praying for sunshine. You build a better roof. That means you choose a minimum viable practice you can execute on the worst day. Not just the best. Identity-based habits are glorious here. Instead of run 5 miles daily, make it lace up, step outside, and jog to the end of the block. The version you complete consistently will outperform the version you fantasize about. Leaders repeat a quiet mantra when their teams feel overwhelmed: no silver bullets. Just a lot of lead bullets, many small changes. Deliberately repeated. That ethos shows up in Glasp's leadership conversations. Genuine change happens through numerous small adjustments and ongoing feedback. Not one grand gesture. If you want an actionable scaffold for inner work, build a simple 3-part loop. First, a morning intention that fits on a post-it. Today I will act like a calm builder. Or, today I will choose depth over display. Or, today I will be the kind of person who leaves work a little better than I found it. Second, a keystone micro habit that proves it. 1 page of deliberate reading after coffee. A 5-minute walk before opening email. A 2-sentence plan for the one task that moves the needle. Third, an evening review that is honest but non-punitive. 1 thing you did well. 1 thing to improve, and 1 small thing you will do tomorrow to improve it. Glasp surfaces this rhythm often pre-decide your focus. Choose small actions that reinforce identity, and journal to reflect and adjust. There's an emotional layer to inner work that can't be ignored. You must learn to be bored again. Boredom is not a moral failing. It is the withdrawal symptom when your reward system detoxes from constant novelty. The 2-minute habit will feel insultingly small precisely because your brain is used to fireworks. Accept the dullness. Embrace it like a weightlifter embraces the bar. It's where the adaptation happens. If you can learn to enjoy unremarkable repetitions, there is not much you cannot build. Most people never make it past this phase because they confuse not exciting with not working. Another obstacle: the myth of linear progress. Inner work looks cyclical because you are human, not a spreadsheet. The metric that matters is not whether you never miss, it's whether you recover quickly and without drama when you do. In practice, that means two policies. First, never miss twice. If a day falls apart, the next day is a reset, not a referendum on your worth. Second, lower the bar. Keep the streak. If you're sick or traveling, shrink the ritual until it fits your reality. 5 deep breaths, 1 paragraph, a 10-second gratitude note. The point is to maintain the identity thread. Now to Seneca's enough. Enough does not mean small or timid, it means proportionate. It means you have the courage to stop at sufficiency rather than sprinting toward more for the sake of more. In a culture where quantity masquerades as quality, more followers, more revenue, more output, enough is a radical boundary. It frees you to choose excellence over accumulation. When you're clear on enough, you can finally say no to opportunities that pay well in applause but poor in alignment. You can end the bizarre ritual where you trade your clarity for credibility points you never cash in. Self-mastery begins with that definition. A master is not the one who controls everything, it's the one who does not need everything to feel whole. Practically, you can encode enough into your week. Pick one metric of sufficiency for each domain. For body, 7,000 steps or 30 minutes of movement. For mind, 1 page of something that stretches you. For craft, 90 minutes of deep work. 3 days a week. For relationships, 1 full attention conversation with no screens. For spirit, a 10-minute sit or walk with no inputs. You can exceed these numbers, but you never fail if you hit them. This is not lowering standards, it is choosing durable standards. The irony is that once you stop worshiping volume, your quality often rises and your output compounds. Journaling deserves special emphasis because it turns experience into instruction. You capture your day so you can study it. You catch patterns faster. You see that the bad days share a trigger: sleep debt, a skipped meal, a thorny task you kept postponing, and you begin to intervene earlier. Stoics journal not to perform but to calibrate. It is a private lab notebook for the self. Use ridiculously simple prompts. What did I do well? What drained me? What would tomorrow's wiser me do differently? If you want a nudge, set a 3-minute timer. You don't need eloquence, you need honesty. Glasp's collections on Stoic practices and reading rituals repeatedly point back to daily journaling as the anchor habit that keeps your inner work tethered to reality. Of course, silence has a social cost. When you stop making your growth a public event, some people will notice less. They'll stop commenting because you stopped announcing. That's fine. The reward of private effort is private respect, the quiet knowledge that you can trust yourself. And oddly enough, over time, the results become visible anyway. It shows in your patience under criticism, your unflustered tone when a meeting derails, your tendency to ask better questions, your willingness to shut a laptop at a decent hour. People will call it confidence. It is actually congruence. Your actions and your values are in the same room. If you want to make your small habits even stickier, attach them to existing anchors. Pair the new with the old. After you brush your teeth, stretch for 1 minute. After you pour coffee, read 1 page. After your last meeting, write a 2-sentence summary of what mattered. Habit science loves this because context cues reduce reliance on willpower. But there's also a Stoic bonus. When you embed wisdom in routines, you reduce your exposure to fortune. You're less at the mercy of whether you feel like it, because the action rides on the back of something you always do. Glasp's habit resources highlight this coupling of anchors and identity. Make the smallest possible change. Tie it to something stable. Let the compounding handle the rest. A final practical cluster for inner work is the no applause pact. Pick 3 practices that are for you alone and vow not to announce them for at least 90 days. The point is not secrecy, it's sovereignty. When you remove the social incentive, you discover whether the behavior is truly yours. Good candidates: a weekly digital Sabbath, a standing hour for deep reading, a boundary on late-night screens, a small generosity no one will track. Watch how your relationship to these behaviors changes when no one is watching. If you keep them anyway, You've built the muscle that all other muscles depend on. None of this is meant to glorify individualism. Inner work is relational because your habits alter how you show up for others. The leader who protects deep work also protects their team from whiplash. The parent who can sit in silence without reaching for a distraction gives their child the gift of unhurried presence. The friend who journals through anger before texting avoids a decade-long fracture. Self-mastery is a public service in disguise. It reduces the emotional spillover that makes groups fragile. It increases the odds that you will be sturdy when someone else needs to lean on you. If you're tempted to argue that your life is uniquely chaotic and therefore uniquely exempt from these rules, I won't argue back. I will only ask, is there a 2-minute version you could do even here? Even now? If the answer is no, we are not talking about chaos, we are talking about perfectionism. The 2-minute version is not beneath you, it is the doorway for you. Walk through it until your nervous system trusts you again. Then widen it. The measure of inner work is not the size of your plans, it is the smoothness of your recovery after disruption. Build structures that assume disruption. Pre-decide what you'll do when you're tired, when you're angry, when you're tempted to spiral. For anger, the protocol might be a 3-breath pause and 1 clarifying question. What am I really trying to protect? For temptation, 5 minutes of movement, then revisit the choice. For overwhelm, 1 page of writing to name the next right tiny action. These scripts do not make you robotic, they make you available to reason when emotions try to stage a coup. Stoicism was never about dulling feeling, it was about governing it so your values don't get hijacked. Inner work is humble because it is local. It changes the 5 minutes after you wake up, not the next 5 years. But it turns out that 5 minutes is how 5 years happen. There's quiet math at work. 1% kinder to your future self every day compounds into a life you recognize as your own. And there's quiet philosophy, too. You stop chasing the thrill of a new identity and start practicing the dignity of a consistent one. Power, in this sense, is not spectacle, it's steadiness. When the storm hits, the person who trained in silence remains calm because calm is not a trick they perform, it's who they are. If you're wondering where to begin, here is a short, unsentimental start list. Decide 1 sentence that names who you're rehearsing this month. Write it on paper and place it where you will trip over it. Choose 1 keystone micro habit that proves it and tie it to an anchor you already do. Protect a 15-minute silence block morning for most, evening for some, and keep it stupidly simple. Breathe. Read a paragraph that elevates you. Write 2 lines. Perform a 2-minute evening audit that answers, without drama, what you honored and what you avoided. Tell no one for a while. When you inevitably fall off, lower the bar and recover within 24 hours. Review weekly, not to scold yourself, but to adjust the environment in your favor. Repeat until this stops feeling like something you're trying and starts feeling like something you are. The wisdom here is not new, and that's the point. The river keeps moving. You don't need to outshout it. You need to learn its rhythm. Step back into it, and swim quietly, consistently, and, most of all, as yourself. And when you forget, remember Seneca's counsel in spirit if not in exact phrasing. The person who needs more and more to feel okay will never feel okay. The person who chooses sufficiency and self-command possesses a freedom that applause can't counterfeit. In a world that confuses noise with meaning, your refusal to perform your growth is not a lack of ambition. It is the clearest sign that the work is real. Passion, discipline, and awareness are not 3 parallel tracks you pick between, they are a flywheel. Passion is the fuel, discipline is the engine, and awareness is the dashboard that tells you what's actually happening under the hood. If one fails, the whole car stutters. Most people treat passion as a rare mood that has to arrive before they move. Discipline as a punishment they use when passion refuses to show up. And awareness as a luxury for quiet weekends. That framing almost guarantees inconsistency. A more useful, American plain-spoken way to see it is this. Passion is the set of activities that reliably put you in a state you value. Discipline is the small, scheduled behaviors that make those activities inevitable. Awareness is your ongoing ability to notice what helps and what harms so you can edit the plan without drama. Once you restructure your life around this flywheel, motivation becomes less relevant. You move because it's Tuesday at 7:30 a.m., not because you feel like it. You adjust because your log shows that Tuesdays at 7:30 a.m. after a late Monday meeting always go sideways. So you swap a lighter practice there and reserve the heavier lift for Wednesday. The work becomes local and observable. The stories you tell about yourself: I'm just not disciplined. I used to be passionate. I never have time to reflect, stop being diagnoses and start becoming design problems. You design different inputs and the outputs change. Start with passion because it's the most misunderstood. In ordinary conversation, follow your passion. Sounds like, chase a volatile feeling and hope everything else rearranges itself. That's not a plan, it's a lottery ticket. A better operational definition: passion is what predictably produces flow for you, periods of total engagement where time compresses and you're absorbed enough to forget to check your phone. Decades of research on flow show it arises when challenge and skill are matched. Too easy breeds boredom. Too hard generates anxiety. The sweet spot invites immersion. Two practical corollaries drop out of that science. First, you can engineer passion by calibrating difficulty. Second, intrinsic reasons beat external optics. You don't need a sabbatical or a new identity to feel passionate. You need a sturdy routine that puts you into the challenge skill channel most days and protects it from noise. Notes and quotes curated on Glasp make the point bluntly. Find the right balance between the challenge of the activity and your current skill. Aim for intrinsic motives, and you'll hit flow more often. When the balance is right, the ego falls away, and your whole attention snaps to the task. People also mistake passion for profession. Sometimes they overlap, often they don't. A personal moat, the durable edge that compounds over time, usually lives where what you enjoy, what you're good at, and what the world values intersect. That's why your passion plan should be built like an investment thesis. Identify a legible edge you can sustain for years. Then compound it by shipping small, regular units of work rather than waiting for a perfect masterpiece. A Glasp newsletter on personal moats frames this with the Ikigai lens. Choose a path that is both enjoyable and rare enough to differentiate you. And avoid commoditized playbooks that anyone can copy. Discipline is where most ambitious people overcomplicate. They schedule a heroic regimen that collapses the first time a flight's delayed or a child gets sick. The correct unit of discipline is not my ideal day. It's my minimum viable behavior on my worst day. The psychology here is identity-based. You don't wait to feel like a disciplined person, you cast votes for that identity by doing the smallest version of the behavior every day until it feels like the truth about you. Habits research summarized across Glasp puts it clearly. Lasting habits come from changing your self-identity and reinforcing it through small, consistent actions. Systems beat goals because they lower the activation energy and survive mood swings. Treat those votes with respect. 2 minutes of guitar scales after dinner. 1 page of sheet music every morning after coffee. A 5-minute mindfulness check before you open email. The point isn't that these micro-habits are enough forever. The point is that they are undeniable. You did them, even on the day that went to hell. The compounding comes from streaks that survive chaos. And because attention is a scarce resource in 2025, design your discipline to happen inside deep, protected blocks. Cal Newport's playbook: choose a deep work philosophy. Schedule distraction-free blocks. Build rituals to cut transition. Friction isn't theory. It's plumbing for the life you say you want. Awareness is the translator between your plan and reality. Without it, passion becomes a fantasy and discipline becomes self-punishment. With it, you steer. The simplest tools are the oldest. Daily journaling to codify what worked and what didn't. Pre-commitments in the morning about what you will face. And an honest evening audit that's brief enough to do and sharp enough to teach. Stoic practitioners have treated journaling as a core exercise for centuries because it converts experience into instruction and builds what they called the inner citadel, composure when externals wobble. Modern Stoic notes on Glasp echo this. Journaling is the conversation with yourself about who you want to be and how far you are from that at any given moment. And morning premeditations of challenges make intelligent responses more likely. To see the flywheel in a life you recognize. Consider a common story. A busy product manager, call him Daniel, played guitar obsessively in college. Then came the job, the wedding, the kids, the never-ending notifications. He still loves music, but the instrument lives in a case behind the laundry pile, and his someday album is a running joke with friends. He assumes the problem is time and motivation. The real problem is architecture. Passion hasn't died, the doorway to it is blocked by poor design. So he runs the 3 pillars. First, he reframes passion as flow and picks a modest target, 30 minutes of deliberate practice 4 days a week. Because flow requires a challenge skill match, he chooses a piece that's just beyond his current level enough to stretch. Not enough to defeat, he prints the sheet, circles the hard bars, and writes the tiniest nightly target, 15 clean reps of bar 7 at half speed. He resists the urge to make it count with a 90-minute hero session he won't repeat. The goal is automaticity, not spectacle. Second, discipline. He blocks 2 deep work slots for music the same way he blocks roadmap sessions Tuesday and Thursday 8 o'clock to 8:30 p.m., after dishes. Before any screen, he treats the block as sacred. If a kid wakes or a call intrudes, he runs the minimum viable version, 5 minutes of fingertip strength drills. Set the guitar on a stand in the living room, and move on. The win is the rep, not the volume. He tracks nothing fancy, just a checkmark and 1 sentence about what improved. Third, awareness. He notices the sessions go better when he preps the space, stand ready. Tuner out, pages open. He notices they go worse after Slack at 7:45 p.m. because his head is in other people's fires. He experiments with a phone off rule 30 minutes before practice, and with changing Tuesdays to Wednesdays after a recurring late meeting. He uses his log to make the next week's plan less fragile. By week 3, something small but crucial shifts. He's no longer bargaining with himself. He starts hearing phrases of the piece in the shower. He begins to crave the quiet work because it has become a reliable source of coherence in a day that is otherwise noisy. He is not chasing his dream. He is building a groove. That groove spills into other domains. He adds a Saturday morning session where his daughter plays along with a plastic ukulele. It's messy. And it plants a seed. He volunteers to play 2 songs at a neighborhood gathering, not a grand reveal. Just a simple performance that restores a part of himself he thought was gone. Notice what didn't happen. He didn't quit his job, convert his garage, or announce a new identity on social media. He built passion by scheduling it, discipline by shrinking it, awareness by journaling it. He engineered flow. The same flywheel fits sport and art. A litigation associate, Maria, used to run track. Law school and billable hours erased the habit. She misses who she was when she ran. Clearer, kinder to herself, less anxious. She doesn't start with a half marathon sign up to force commitment. She picks a 2-minute trigger, laces on, out the door. A 12-minute jog 3 times a week at a conversational pace. And 1 Saturday loop with a friend who won't talk pace. She writes down 1 thing that felt good and 1 that didn't. She experiments until she finds the friction points. Late-night emails correlate with missed runs. A 3:30 p.m. snack averts post-work bonks. She sees, in black and white, that her worst runs follow nights of 5 hours sleep. She stops treating herself like a machine and starts treating sleep as the first discipline. She adds a mild, structured progression, add 2 minutes to the jog each week, and keeps her identity label modest. I'm a runner because I run. Flow arrives in small pockets, the park corner where she always hits a tailwind. The stretch where her form finally feels quiet. Discipline supplies the repetitions. Awareness edits the plan. Passion returns by showing up, not by being chased. The notes many people highlight on Glasp about soft discipline and scheduling around energy, not just time, are made for this kind of reboot. Or take Quan, a senior developer who used to sketch obsessively in high school. He claims he's not creative anymore, but what he really means is that he doesn't have a container for creativity. He sets up a 20-minute art block after lunch 3 days a week. He chooses constraints that force focus, black pen only. 1 theme per week, hands, doors, street corners. 1 rule, draw from life. No references. He pairs the habit with a tiny awareness drill. 1 sentence on what he noticed about light and shadow. Within a month, his perception changes. The city looks different because he has trained himself to see. That seeing bleeds into code reviews. He spots edge cases earlier. Awareness, visual, emotional, somatic, is not a luxury for artists. It's an amplifier for professionals. Where does discipline cross into self-harm? when it's designed for optics instead of outcomes. If the ritual exists so you can screenshot it, you'll require applause to continue. If the ritual exists to put you into meaningful concentration, you'll keep it because it pays you internally. Work ethic at all costs is a fragile plan. A healthy work ethic is one built on small systems that make the best work more likely and keep you present for the rest of your life. It's no accident that many luck frameworks end up sounding like discipline. Show up. Ask. Reduce noise. Build routines so you notice chances others miss. That's not mysticism, that's probability. You can, and should, wire this into your calendar like plumbing. A practical pattern that works in American corporate reality looks like this. Decide the seasonal focus 3 months where passion gets its shot. Guitar, tennis, oil painting, ceramics, whatever. Lock 2 45-minute deep blocks per week and 1 social touch, jam session. Class, or club, per month. In each block, run a 3-part routine. 5 minutes to warm up and review. 30 minutes on a specific stretch goal just beyond your current skill. 10 minutes to cool down and log what changed. In the log, mark energy, distractions, and a 1-line next step. For discipline, set a floor that you can do half asleep. 5 minutes for scales. 10 minutes easy jog. 10 thumbnail sketches. When life explodes, do the floor. For awareness, run a Sunday review that fits on an index card. Where did I hit flow? What made it easier? What made it harder? What one environmental tweak will I test this week? Keep the experiments embarrassingly small. Guitar stand visible. Shoes by the door. Art kit in a clear pouch. Push notifications off for the first hour of the day. Each edit reduces drag. If you manage people, run the same flywheel for the team. Passion shows up as work that matters, clear problem statements and visible user impact. Discipline shows up as rhythmic deep work windows for the whole group and a bias for checklists over heroics. Awareness shows up as short, honest postmortems that fix the process instead of blaming personalities. Leaders who design for flow, fewer context switches, narrower priorities, visible definitions of done unlock both quality and energy. And because organizations are human systems, the private habits of the leader leak into the culture. If your calendar worships noise, your team will, too. If your calendar protects thinking, people will copy that protection. You may worry that this all sounds slow. It is. Speed returns at the back end is compounding. The guitar part you fingered 10,000 times frees you on stage to improvise. The tempo runs you stacked all winter give you discretion to sprint when the case load spikes. The sketchbooks teach you to see composition instinctively, so your design reviews get surgical and fast. The system moves you from trying to feel passionate to becoming a person who reliably enters passion because the conditions are engineered. James Clear's line that every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become is the bumper sticker for the whole pillar of discipline. His argument that habits compound like interest tells you why patience beats drama. Finally, keep one eye on the meta level. More awareness makes better passion and gentler discipline. If you know that your best music happens when you haven't touched a screen for an hour, you'll restructure the hour. If you notice that team sparring before a run makes the first mile feel lighter, you'll add it on purpose. If you realize that what you called laziness was actually sleep debt and poor nutrition, you'll stop trying to willpower your way through and start fixing inputs. Awareness is not navel gazing, it's operational intelligence. A few minutes of reflection can prevent a month of self-blame. The journals and highlight collections many Stoics and modern practitioners keep exist for exactly this reason: to make pattern recognition faster and to keep your standards anchored in something steadier than mood. When a season ends, debrief without melodrama. Did the flywheel spin? Did discipline create enough scheduled exposure to the challenge skill channel for flow to show up? Did awareness make the right edits? If yes, renew or level up. If no, change one variable at a time. Swap time slots before you swap crafts. Adjust difficulty before you switch passions. Add a person before you add a platform. And if a passion stubbornly refuses to deliver flow after honest effort and smart calibrations, free yourself to choose another. Curiosity is a better predictor of longevity than prestige. You don't need to impress anyone, you need to keep showing up. The point of all this is not a shinier resume or another thing to optimize. It's to become someone whose days feel like they belong to them. Passion gives you a reason to enter the day with energy. Discipline makes that entry non-negotiable. Awareness keeps you honest about what's working. Get those 3 right and the surface metrics: fitness, output, skills tend to take care of themselves. Get them wrong and you'll live on a seesaw of guilt and binges. The work is ordinary on purpose. You are not trying to win a moment, you are trying to build a life. Make it boringly repeatable, trivially startable, embarrassingly small to miss, and you'll wake up in a different place. Not because you discovered a new you, but because you practiced one into existence. Most people live inside cages that have no locks. The bars are ideas they inherited. The ceilings are stories they told themselves long ago. And the chains are sentences that sound so normal they pass unchallenged. I'm not that kind of person. It's too late for me. People like me don't get chances like that. These limiting beliefs are invisible fences. They don't need to be true to control you. They only need to be repeated often enough that you stop testing them. Once you stop testing, they calcify into your identity. That's the tragedy. Not that life is hard, though it is, but that most of us sabotage ourselves before the world even gets the chance. The Stoics would call this suffering more in imagination than in reality. Seneca observed that we fear in advance more than we suffer in fact. And Epictetus reminded his students that people are disturbed not by things but by their views of things. The philosophy is ancient, but the pattern is modern. The moment you challenge those invisible scripts, you start breaking chains. The process begins with recognizing that beliefs are not facts. They are hypotheses your younger self wrote to survive a particular season. You may have failed a math exam at 12 and quietly drafted the story. I'm not smart at numbers. You may have been rejected in high school and encoded the message. I'm not lovable. You may have watched your parents grind without reward and concluded, hard work never pays off. Each story once explained the world enough to help you move forward. But stories designed for survival at one stage often become prisons at the next. The grown adult with resources, resilience, and perspective still lives under the rules of the anxious child. The work of breaking chains is a kind of archaeology, excavating which beliefs you're still obeying that were written by someone too young, too scared, or too limited to know better. That recognition alone can loosen the grip. Consider how often a limiting belief is disguised as realism. A man tells himself he's just practical when he avoids pursuing art. But the truth is he's afraid of ridicule. A woman insists she's just being realistic when she declines a leadership role. But she's replaying an old narrative about being invisible. Realism often means, I don't want to risk testing this belief because I might be wrong. The irony is that staying realistic is often the most dangerous gamble because it guarantees you'll never know what you could have become. Stoic practice would say, distinguish what is up to you from what is not. Your effort, your preparation, your willingness to take the first step, these are yours. The outcome, the applause, the speed of progress, these belong to fortune. If you only permit yourself to act when outcomes are guaranteed, you'll never act at all. Breaking chains means detaching your self-worth from external outcomes and focusing instead on whether you chose courage over comfort in each decision. A personal story makes this sharper. Imagine a woman named Lisa, raised in a small town where no one in her family went to college. Her mother cleaned houses, her father worked construction, and the family's story was simple. People like us don't do big things. Lisa loved science, but when she told her teacher she wanted to be a doctor, the reply was a laugh. Be realistic. Maybe nursing, if you're lucky. That seed of doubt grew. She went to community college, dropped out when she felt overwhelmed, and spent years working retail, quietly haunted by the dream she had abandoned. One day, while stocking shelves, she overheard 2 nurses talking about the shortage of medical staff and the non-traditional paths into healthcare. Something broke loose. She decided to test the chain. She enrolled in a single-night class. She expected failure. Instead, she passed. She added another class, then another. Slowly, painfully, she chipped away at the belief. 10 years later, Lisa walked across the stage with her MD. She wasn't a prodigy. She wasn't unusually gifted. She was someone who decided not to obey a script that wasn't hers. That is the essence of breaking chains, not superhuman talent. Just ordinary courage repeated often enough to build extraordinary results. The texture of self-doubt is familiar to everyone. It's that quicksand feeling before a presentation where your brain whispers, "They'll find out you're a fraud." It's the hesitation before sending an application because you convince yourself, "They'd never pick me." It's the ache in your chest when you see someone else succeeding and the voice says, "That's for them, not for me." These aren't objective evaluations, they're internalized limitations. Cognitive science calls it imposter syndrome. But the Stoics had already diagnosed it: attachment to externals and fear of disgrace. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Self-doubt is nothing more than a misestimate of yourself. Breaking chains requires the audacity to revoke that misestimate. One useful technique is reframing failure as data. A limiting belief thrives on the assumption that setbacks are verdicts. I tried once. It didn't work. Therefore it will never work. Awareness flips this. I tried once. It didn't work. Therefore I just collected information about what not to repeat. Thomas Edison's line, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work," is cliché because it's true. Modern behavioral science reinforces this. People who interpret setbacks as learning opportunities build resilience and outperform those who interpret them as permanent identities. So the practice is simple but not easy. Every time you hear the old story, you replace it with a test. "I'm not good at public speaking" becomes, "I'm currently inexperienced at public speaking. And I'll collect data by practicing in front of 5 friends." "I'm too late to change careers" becomes, "I will run an experiment by taking 1 online class in a new field." The chain loses its power when it is treated as a hypothesis instead of a fact. Awareness of others' stories can also help. Take the example of a janitor who loved basketball, but thought he was too short and too poor to matter. He played pickup games at night, mostly to blow off steam. One evening, a local coach noticed his intensity and invited him to practice with a semi-pro team. His instinct was to say no, he was just a janitor. After all, but he forced himself to show up. Within a few years, he wasn't cleaning the gym, he was playing in it. Or think of a grandmother who always wanted to paint but believed she had no talent. At 65, she finally enrolled in a community art class. She struggled, laughed at her shaky hands, and kept painting. At 70, she held her first exhibition. At 72, she sold her first piece. Her family stopped introducing her as retired nurse and started saying, "artist." The only thing that changed was her willingness to reject the chain that told her she was too old. Closer to daily life, breaking chains often looks small. It's the shy student who raises their hand once. The overweight man who jogs for 3 minutes, gasping but proud. The single mother who applies for a job she thinks she's underqualified for. Each act looks trivial in isolation, but collectively, these are acts of rebellion against invisible fences. And once you act, you create new evidence. Evidence accumulates until the new story has more weight than the old one. That's why action, not affirmation alone, is the cure. You can repeat, "I'm worthy," in the mirror until your throat is sore. But until you take a step that contradicts the old belief, your brain has no reason to update. Belief follows evidence. Chains break when you provide new evidence. Discipline plays its role here. 2. Breaking chains isn't one dramatic leap, it's daily friction. Every day you choose to test the cage. Every day you resist the urge to collapse back into the familiar. In time, the chain rusts. You see this in people who quit addictions, who rebuild after bankruptcy, who leave abusive relationships. The world may applaud the big break, but the reality is hundreds of quiet refusals to repeat the old story. That's why it matters to track even the smallest victories. Write them down, share them with a trusted friend, not to seek applause, but to record evidence against the old narrative. Over time, your journal becomes a courtroom where the prosecutor of self-doubt keeps losing cases. It's also crucial to notice the social component of chains. Many limiting beliefs are inherited. Families, cultures, and communities pass them down. Our people don't do that. Men don't cry. Women aren't leaders. Money is evil. You may think you're just being cautious, but often you're enacting someone else's fear. part of breaking chains is refusing to let dead people's anxieties govern your living choices. Respect your heritage, but don't confuse respect with obedience. You can honor your parents without repeating every limitation they handed you. You can love your culture and still edit the parts that stifle you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he lived among people who would gossip, misjudge, and resist change, but he refused to let their ignorance chain his reason. The same applies to us. We can acknowledge the weight of social expectations while choosing a freer standard. Examples abound in modern workplaces. Think of the employee who never applies for promotion because they assume they'll be rejected. When finally coaxed into trying, they're shocked to get the role. The chain wasn't real, it was imagined. Or the entrepreneur who delays launching because they think, what if no one cares? When they finally publish, they discover not only customers but investors. The old belief, no one will care what I make, was untested fiction. Once tested, it crumbled. The sad reality is that countless projects, businesses, and art pieces die before birth because the chain convinces the creator to quit at the idea stage. The world loses not because the ideas were weak, but because the chains were strong. Breaking chains doesn't mean recklessness. It doesn't mean ignoring every constraint. Some constraints are real: physics, economics, biology. You may not become an Olympic sprinter at 50, but you can certainly become fitter than you are. You may not become a concert pianist without training, but you can certainly learn to play well enough to bring joy to yourself and others. The danger of limiting beliefs is not that they prevent impossible goals, but that they prevent possible improvements. The Stoics were clear: focus on what is within your control. The chains whisper that nothing is. Inner work insists that something always is. Start there. There's another dimension: gratitude. Gratitude doesn't seem related to breaking chains, but it is. A scarcity mindset amplifies limiting beliefs because it convinces you that opportunities are rare and you shouldn't risk losing what little you have. Gratitude reframes your current position as abundance, however modest. From that position, you can risk more. A person who feels grateful for their daily bread is freer to test new recipes. A worker who is grateful for one mentor is freer to ask for another. Gratitude doesn't make the chains disappear, but it softens their grip. It creates enough confidence to shake the bars. The story of breaking chains always includes fear. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to move anyway. Every meaningful step into growth will feel like trespassing against the self-image you've carried. That's why it feels wrong. The brain protests. This isn't you. But that's the point. You're sculpting a new you. Heraclitus said no man steps in the same river twice. Likewise, no self should live the same story forever. You are not betraying the old you by growing. You are honoring it by using its lessons to build the next. In time, what was once extraordinary becomes ordinary. The student who trembled giving a 1-minute speech is one day delivering a keynote. The man who gasped through his first jog is one day finishing a marathon. The grandmother who nervously painted apples is one day mentoring young artists. The old chain rusts into memory, and the new identity feels natural. Outsiders call it a miracle. Insiders know it was dozens of unglamorous choices strung together. The practical formula is unsexy. Identify the chain. Translate it into a testable hypothesis. Design the smallest possible action that disproves it. Repeat until evidence accumulates. Journal the wins. Recruit allies who believe in the freer version of you. Cut contact, where possible, with people who profit from your chains. Protect your progress by guarding your environment: less noise, more triggers that make the new behavior likely. Measure yourself by fidelity to the process, not applause for outcomes. That's it, not magic, not destiny, just deliberate, stubborn practice. And here's the last paradox. Once you break some chains, you realize there are more. Freedom isn't a single event, it's a lifestyle of testing limits. The great danger isn't that you'll fail. It's that you'll succeed once, then stop. You'll plateau at a new identity and mistake it for permanence. The chains return in subtler forms. The work is never finished. But that's not depressing, it's liberating. It means you always have another frontier, another script to edit, another story to rewrite. Ordinary people become extraordinary not because they run out of chains, but because they refuse to stop breaking them. Living with purpose is not about chasing a single grand mission that magically ties everything together. It's about cultivating a way of moving through life where balance, resilience, and the willingness to accept challenges become the default posture. Most people think purpose means some dramatic revelation where the clouds part and you suddenly know you were meant to do one thing forever. But that's not how it works in reality. Purpose is built the same way muscle is built, by stress and recovery, by showing up daily, and by finding alignment between what you value and how you spend your hours. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius didn't sit on a mountain waiting for inspiration. He ruled an empire, fought wars, and wrote his reflections in the dirt and noise of a military camp. Meditations wasn't a philosophical hobby, it was his survival manual. He was constantly surrounded by chaos, betrayal, and the burden of power. But instead of collapsing under it, he transformed the weight into wisdom. That is what it looks like to live with purpose under pressure. Balance is the first element. Balance doesn't mean a perfect 50-50 split between work and rest, or family and career. Balance means knowing what deserves your energy today and what doesn't. It means being able to step back and say, this matters, this doesn't, and I refuse to spend my life majoring in minor things. Without balance, people mistake busyness for meaning. They pack calendars with obligations and think they are purposeful because they are exhausted. In reality, exhaustion is often a sign of misaligned priorities. A balanced life is not one without effort, it's one where effort is distributed in ways that align with what you actually care about. Think of the person who spends 10 hours a day scrolling through social media, arguing with strangers, and then complains about having no time for their kids. That's not a lack of time, that's a lack of balance. Living with purpose requires ruthless honesty about where your energy leaks. Once you patch those leaks, you don't need to find purpose, it emerges because you finally have the capacity to notice what matters. Resilience is the second pillar. Resilience doesn't mean ignoring pain or pretending challenges don't hurt. It means you refuse to let pain define you. Marcus Aurelius endured plague, betrayal, and the constant stress of war. But he didn't allow those conditions to dictate his inner state. He accepted them as part of the human condition. Resilience is built the same way a callus forms, by repeated exposure to discomfort until it no longer controls you. Imagine a young athlete training for a marathon. The first long run feels impossible. The second hurts. The third breaks through a barrier. And slowly the body learns to adapt. Life works the same way. Every time you endure hardship without giving up, you're teaching yourself that you can carry more than you thought. The point is not to seek suffering for its own sake. The point is to face the suffering you cannot avoid with composure. That composure is the essence of resilience. When people complain about life being unfair, what they often mean is that life has presented them with challenges they didn't expect. Resilience is the discipline of expecting challenges and preparing to face them. Acceptance of challenge is the third component. Most people live as though the goal is to avoid discomfort forever. But discomfort is the price of growth. Purpose cannot exist without friction, because friction is what reveals whether you truly value something. If you say your purpose is to be a writer, but the first rejection letter makes you quit, then maybe writing was not your purpose, or maybe you haven't yet learned to carry the cost of it. Purpose requires sacrifice, and sacrifice always comes with discomfort. This doesn't mean you need to suffer endlessly, but it does mean you should measure your purpose not by how good it feels in the beginning, but by what you're willing to endure for it. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That line captures it perfectly. Challenges are not detours from purpose, they're the road itself. The difficulty you face is not blocking your purpose, it is shaping it. In modern times, the challenge is rarely a battlefield, it's distraction. Social media is the new plague of the mind. Instead of swords and shields, we fight algorithms designed to hijack our attention. You might think the stakes are lower, but they're not. Every minute lost to distraction is a minute you don't get back. And enough wasted minutes add up to a wasted life. People wonder why they feel anxious, unfocused, and purposeless, but they check their phones 200 times a day. That constant interruption fractures attention into 1,000 pieces. And without attention, purpose is impossible. Living with purpose requires reclaiming your focus from the machines that monetize your distraction. Stoicism offers the antidote. Control what you can, ignore what you can't, and put your attention where it matters. When you stop feeding the cycle of endless scrolling and start feeding your deeper values, reading, creating, connecting, you rediscover purpose not as a theory but as a lived experience. A relatable example is the office worker who complains of burnout. She spends hours each evening on TikTok or Instagram, convincing herself it's relaxation, but she doesn't feel rested, she feels empty. When she finally decides to apply Stoic discipline, she sets a boundary. No screens after 9 p.m. instead. She journals for 10 minutes and reads a few pages of a book that matters to her. At first, it feels boring, but within weeks, she notices a shift. Her sleep improves, her mornings feel calmer, and her anxiety lessens. Most importantly, she begins to feel that her evenings belong to her again. That small boundary against distraction opened the door to purpose because she could finally hear herself think. Purpose doesn't announce itself in a notification. It whispers when the noise dies down. Without silence, you never hear it. Another example. A young man who always dreamed of starting a nonprofit to help underprivileged kids. But he keeps putting it off because he feels trapped in his job. Every time he gets the urge, he distracts himself with video games, Netflix, or social media. He tells himself he'll start someday. Years pass. One day, after reading Marcus Aurelius' line about not wasting the present moment, he realizes the chain is distraction, not fate. He doesn't need to quit his job immediately. He just needs to redirect an hour a week toward his vision. He starts small, writing a proposal, calling a mentor, reaching out to one school. Slowly, the idea becomes reality. He still has his job, but he also has a project that feels like purpose. That project sustains him, not because it is easy, but because it demands something real from him. Purpose is like that. It's not about waiting for a perfect stage. It's about practicing courage in the cracks of your current life. Balance, resilience, and acceptance of challenge don't exist in isolation, they reinforce one another. Balance gives you the clarity to know which challenges are worth facing. Resilience gives you the stamina to keep facing them. Acceptance reframes obstacles as teachers rather than enemies. Together, they turn ordinary lives into purposeful ones. Consider Marcus Aurelius again. He didn't choose his challenges. He didn't ask for plague or betrayal, but he accepted them as material for virtue. He used them as exercises to build the inner fortress that made him unshakable. Modern people can do the same, even if the battlefields are offices, schools, or homes rather than frontiers. The details change, the principles don't. In the end, living with purpose is not about a perfect plan. It's about alignment. Aligning your energy with your values, your habits with your vision, your attention with what you actually care about. It's about resilience. Refusing to let hardship define you or distraction steal you. It's about acceptance. Understanding that challenges are not interruptions of your purpose but the proof of it. A life of purpose doesn't look glamorous from the outside. It looks like someone who knows what they stand for, who shows up with steadiness, who doesn't crumble under pressure, and who doesn't waste themselves on noise. In a world addicted to applause and distraction, that steadiness is radical, and as Marcus Aurelius showed in the darkest nights of war, it is also possible. The idea of becoming a new self is less about discovering something foreign and more about peeling away what was false so that what remains feels authentic. People often wait for a dramatic rebirth, some thunderclap moment that marks a clear before and after. But in reality, the new self emerges through small daily decisions. Freedom is not given, it is practiced. Living authentically is not about announcing to the world who you are in a single declaration but about aligning your actions, words, and thoughts with your values one moment at a time. Rebuilding every day sounds exhausting, but it is the opposite. It is liberating. It removes the weight of maintaining a false persona and replaces it with the lighter responsibility of simply being congruent with yourself. Freedom in this sense does not mean doing whatever you feel like at any moment. That version of freedom often leads to chaos, addiction, or emptiness. The Stoic definition is more demanding. Freedom is the ability to govern yourself, to act according to reason and virtue rather than impulse and fear. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that true freedom lies in mastery over one's mind, not in escaping duties. To live as a new self requires this form of inner liberty. Imagine a person who always felt chained to the opinions of others. Every post on social media was crafted for likes. Every outfit chosen to avoid judgment. Every career move filtered through the imagined expectations of peers. At some point, they realize that this slavery to external validation leaves them hollow. When they start acting on their own values, posting what they believe, dressing how they prefer, choosing work that feels aligned, they may lose some approval but gain freedom. That is the paradox. You lose the audience you never needed and find the life you always wanted. Authenticity is risky because it disrupts the comfort of others who benefit from your mask. Friends who enjoyed the agreeable version of you may not like the assertive one. Colleagues who relied on your silence may resist when you speak. Family members who shaped your role may bristle when you redefine it. That resistance is not proof you are wrong, it is proof you are changing. To live as your new self, you must be willing to endure temporary friction. Seneca wrote that it is better to be disliked for being genuine than to be praised for living a lie. In practice, authenticity requires courage at small moments, saying no when you mean no, admitting when you don't know, expressing enthusiasm without irony, refusing to participate in gossip. Over time, these small acts accumulate into a life where you feel whole instead of split. Daily rebuilding is not glamorous. It's not the sweeping resolution on New Year's Eve. It's the quiet recommitment on a Wednesday afternoon when no one is watching. Think of it like exercise. You cannot stay strong on yesterday's workout. Strength is maintained and built by today's repetition. Likewise, integrity is not preserved by yesterday's good decision. It is renewed by today's choice. The new self must be chosen again and again. That's why rituals matter. Morning reflection, evening journaling, midday pauses. These are not routines for productivity hacks. They are scaffolding for identity. They remind you of who you intend to be and give you checkpoints to adjust when you drift. One example is a man who struggled with anger for years. He thought of himself as someone with a bad temper, doomed to lash out. But instead of waiting for a miraculous change, he began a simple practice. Before responding in anger, he forced himself to take 3 breaths. At first, he failed half the time. But over weeks, the practice became easier. Slowly, his identity shifted from a man with a bad temper to a man learning to master his temper. Months later, others noticed the difference. Calmer meetings, gentler responses, fewer explosions. He hadn't been reborn in a single moment. He had rebuilt himself breath by breath. That is the power of daily reconstruction. Living authentically also means refusing to play roles that no longer fit. Many people cling to outdated identities because they fear losing continuity. A high-powered executive who secretly longs to paint keeps working endless hours because quitting feels like betrayal of the old self. But authenticity doesn't always require quitting, it requires integrating. The executive can keep the career but also carve space for art. The point is not to discard responsibilities but to add back the parts of yourself that were silenced. The new self is not a stranger, it is the fuller version of you that has been waiting beneath compromise and fear. Freedom also involves letting go of the compulsion to control outcomes. You are not your job title, your follower count, your bank balance, or your reputation. Those can all change overnight. The Stoics urged detachment from externals because they knew identity built on them is fragile. The new self roots identity in character, how you show up, how you treat others, how you respond to adversity. A modern example is someone laid off after 20 years at a company. If their identity was entirely manager at X, the loss feels like death. But if their identity was someone who leads, builds, and mentors, they can rebuild that self in a new setting. Jobs vanish, character travels. Living with this orientation creates resilience because your sense of self is portable. Another lesson of the new self is that small victories matter more than public recognition. Celebrating private progress teaches you to trust yourself. The woman who runs her first mile alone in the dark has taken a more significant step toward freedom than someone who announces a marathon but never trains. The student who studies 1 hour a night despite doubts is more authentic than the influencer who posts motivational quotes but lives in contradiction. In the quiet moments where no one is watching, you either strengthen the new self or sabotage it. That is why Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, not to an audience. He wasn't curating content, he was aligning his soul. Technology makes authenticity harder because it tempts us into endless comparison. Social media feeds are highlight reels that make others appear flawless and ourselves inadequate. The new self rejects this trap by focusing inward rather than outward. Instead of asking, "How do I look compared to them?" the question becomes, "Am I aligned with my own values today?" That shift is subtle but revolutionary. It replaces envy with integrity. A person scrolling through endless posts of travel, wealth, or beauty can either feel small or decide to anchor their worth in their own progress. One way is slavery to comparison, the other is freedom in authenticity. Resilience, too, is cultivated in the process of rebuilding. Each time you return to your values after a setback, you reinforce that setbacks are not fatal. You miss a workout but return the next day. You slip into distraction but reset your boundaries. You lose your temper but apologize and recommit. Every recovery strengthens the new self because it proves that identity is not destroyed by failure, it is built by recovery. In this way, resilience becomes a habit, not just a trait, and habits are choices you can renew daily. The lesson to draw from all this is that the new self is not an endpoint but a practice. You will never arrive at a final version of yourself, perfectly authentic, eternally free. Life will keep demanding edits. Roles will change, circumstances will shift, new fears will emerge. Each time, you will be tempted to retreat into old masks. But each time you choose alignment instead, you prove again that you can rebuild. The practice of living authentically, freely, and with daily renewal is not easy, but it is profoundly rewarding. The reward is not applause, it is peace. The peace of knowing that your life, with all its flaws and challenges, belongs to you. The final takeaway is simple but demanding. Do not wait for permission to become the new self. No one will hand you a certificate saying you are ready. You must begin with whatever small act of alignment you can manage today. Drink water instead of scrolling. Write a paragraph instead of complaining. Tell the truth instead of pleasing. Take the breath before the angry reply. Each choice is a brick. Over time, the structure stands tall. The new self is not built once, it is built daily. In silence, in honesty, in courage, and when you look back years later, you will realize that the extraordinary change was nothing more than the accumulation of ordinary, authentic days. That is the true lesson. Freedom is possible. Authenticity is worth the cost. And the rebuilding never ends. You've walked with me through the journey of rebuilding, of peeling back the layers, of rediscovering freedom and authenticity. And now, we stand at the point where reflection turns into responsibility. The lesson is simple but demanding. You do not need to wait for permission to become your new self. No one is going to hand you a certificate that says you are ready. No one is going to announce, "Now you may live freely. Now you may be authentic." That power has been yours all along. The new self is not waiting at the end of the road, it is shaped in every step you take along the way. Every moment you choose integrity over convenience. Every breath you take before reacting in anger. Every distraction you resist. Every doubt you confront. These are the bricks of the person you are becoming. You are not just hoping for transformation, you are practicing it. Remember this. Freedom is not the absence of obstacles but the ability to stand unshaken in their presence. Authenticity is not about being liked but about being real. Rebuilding is not about erasing your past but about honoring it as material for your future. When Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations in the Chaos of War, he wasn't waiting for peace to find purpose. He built purpose in the middle of chaos. You can do the same. You don't need perfect conditions. You need courage in imperfect ones. Think about your own life. Where are the cages you've built out of fear or habit? Where are the scripts you are still rehearsing that no longer belong to you? Where are you outsourcing your attention to noise instead of investing it in what you value? The answers to these questions are not abstract, they're practical. And the only way to live as your new self is to take action on them today. So what do you do now? Start small. Drink water instead of scrolling. Journal one sentence about your day instead of numbing it with noise. Tell the truth in one conversation instead of hiding behind politeness. Protect 1 hour for what matters instead of giving it away to distractions. Don't wait for a grand transformation. Become your new self one choice at a time. And when you stumble, and you will remember that resilience is built in the recovery. Missing a habit is not failure. Falling back into distraction is not the end. What matters is that you return. Every return reinforces your new identity. Every recovery is a declaration. I am not who I was. I am who I am becoming. That's how the chains break. That's how the old self fades. That's how the new self is born, not in drama, but in daily recommitment. The ultimate lesson is this: your life belongs to you, not to the expectations of others, not to the noise of the crowd, not to the fear of judgment, to you. And when you finally live from that place, everything changes. You don't need more applause, you need more alignment. You don't need more perfection, you need more presence. And when you give yourself those things, you become unshakable. If this message has spoken to you, if you feel even a spark of recognition that this is your time to rebuild, then I invite you to act now. Don't just close this video and move on. Do something, anything that proves to yourself you are ready to live as your new self. And while you're here, help this channel continue to grow so that we can keep sharing these conversations. Like this video, share it with a friend who might need it, subscribe for more, and if you'd like to go deeper in supporting us, consider leaving a super thanks donation. It means the world and helps us create more content that nourishes the soul rather than just filling the feed. The new self is not a dream. It's a practice. It's yours for the taking, if you choose it daily. So ask yourself, who will I be tomorrow if I act with courage today? That question is your compass. Let it guide you, and remember, you are free, you are capable, and you are allowed to live a life that feels like it belongs to you. This is your invitation. Don't wait. Begin now.